This video covers the risks of speed at an intersection, especially when it comes to running a red light. And here we are looking at either end of the scale, be it either a vehicle crossing the intersection far too slowly or too quickly. In the first part of the video, we're having a look at too slowly, and the latter portion too quickly. Let's start off with the first animation then. Here we have the driver of the red vehicle running a red traffic light and crossing the intersection far too slowly. This increases the risk of a collision in the intersection simply due to the fact that the vehicle spends more time in the intersection, thereby increasing the chances that the vehicle will be collided with by other vehicles approaching from the side. Hence, the more time you spend in the intersection, the greater the likelihood of that impact and the greater the risk. In the real life clip, we'll see this vehicle crossing far too slowly with the resultant collision in the intersection. In the second animation, very similar to the first animation, we have the driver of the red vehicle running a red traffic light, crossing the intersection far too slowly, but this animation includes an added risk. Let's see what that is. Here the driver of the red vehicle, realizing that he's in a predicament, his first reaction is to slam on brakes. Now this is the worst thing to do because, as we mentioned in the previous animation, the more time you spend in an intersection, the greater is the chance or the likelihood or the risk that you'll be impacted with. So coming to a complete stop now really exposes yourself to the greatest risk. There's also an added reason as to why not to stop in an intersection, and we'll cover this in the next real life clip. Now we have this driver crossing, slamming on brakes, and being collided with. So why is stopping in an intersection the worst case scenario? Well, because of what we've seen here in this impact. So when we stop in the intersection, the vehicle that collides with us is going to impact us more than likely in the center of the vehicle. If it's a right-hand drive, well, then we're going to take the brunt of the impact as the driver of the vehicle. So that's the worst case scenario. If we were to slow down and be impacted in the front of the vehicle, that would be the next best case scenario, because then we're not receiving the direct impact force of the collision. However, if we see that we are going to be impacted with and we can accelerate, well, that's the best case scenario, provided, of course, that there are no other vehicles speeding through the intersection, that when we accelerate, we now collide with them, and the impact from those vehicles or that vehicle is even greater than this vehicle. But generally speaking, all other factors being equal, the best case scenario is to accelerate through the intersection. Why is that? Well, because the back of the vehicle is generally lighter than the front of the vehicle, because most vehicles have the engine in the front. So if this vehicle was to collide with the front of the vehicle, a lot of the energy due to the inertia of the engine would be absorbed by the vehicles themselves. So a lot more damage would be incurred by each vehicle. However, if the vehicle impacting with the vehicle crossing was to strike at the back of the vehicle, because of it being lighter, a lot of that impact energy would be converted into kinetic energy, energy of movement, in that the back of the vehicle would then be swung around, and so a lot of that energy would be absorbed by the movement of the vehicle, and that in turn will result in less damage to the vehicle. So where you're in a situation, never stop in an intersection, either slow down if you can avoid the vehicle, but the best case scenario is to accelerate, provided, of course, that you're not going to land up in a worse situation with other vehicles traveling at even a higher speed. I've stressed a number of times in previous videos, which I'll repeat in this video and any future videos, that the greatest risk or danger when it comes to intersections is high speed. Never enter an intersection at high speed. Always slow down well before getting close to an intersection. Let's have a look at the first animation. Here the driver of the red vehicle was traveling far too quickly, which leaves little room for error should the traffic lights change and vehicles now suddenly start crossing the intersection. There's very little tolerance for error, and one's very likely to be involved in not just a collision, but a serious collision. So to repeat the point, we want to always try and avoid entering an intersection at a high speed. In the real life clip, we'll see that this is the case. Here's a driver traveling far too quickly, and so once a vehicle now decides he's going to cross over the intersection, this driver has little room to be able to find an escape route or to carry out any corrective or avoidance behavior. In the next animation, what I want to demonstrate here is we might be fortunate enough not to have a direct impact, but just the glancing off another vehicle in the intersection, if we're traveling at high speed, can change our trajectory, and that can also lead to serious consequences. That's what's being demonstrated in this animation. There we go. So we see that this vehicle crossing the intersection just glanced the vehicle traveling at a high speed. You can see the distance that he skidded down the road. His trajectory was changed. And had there been more passengers at the bus stop here, could have been quite a tragic outcome. In the next animation, what I want to highlight here is where one's visibility is limited. So we've got a vehicle waiting at the intersection here, a high-speed vehicle coming down this direction, and because of the intervening buildings, each driver's visibility of the other is somewhat limited. So especially where our visibility or our view is restricted of the intersection, then we've got to be even more cautious and slow down even more, because we can't see well ahead any drivers wanting to move across the intersection, so we've got even less time to respond or to react. Now notice this building, which is close to the corner of the road, so vehicles that are waiting on the side here won't be seen by vehicles traveling down this side of the road as it approaches the intersection. So any speeding vehicles won't have any view of vehicles from the side here until the very last moments, which doesn't give them enough time to react. That's what we see in the real life clip. In the next animation, once again, a driver with the red vehicle speeding through the intersection and doesn't have much time to react. So there the driver of the red vehicle had seen that the traffic light had changed, decided that he was traveling far too fast and tried to brake harshly in order to come to a stop in time. But because of his speed, overshot into the intersection and still landed up with the collision. So be careful of traveling at too high a speed, because if we need to come to a stop or slow down, we may not be able to do that in time due to the sheer speed that we're traveling. So there we have the driver of this vehicle now overshooting into this intersection with the resultant collision.
Please like, subscribe, and get notified.